This is a one-speaker meeting. Please welcome our speaker tonight, Adam.
Adam, alcoholic. I'd like to thank Sean for asking me to talk tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ultimately, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. Want to welcome you if you're new. If you're trying this one more time, you know, we talk about January being the AA tryouts. It's a little busy here tonight. Want to welcome you. If perhaps you think this won't work for you, want to congratulate the chip takers. I had so many chips in AA, it was ridiculous. I mean, I could have played poker with them all, you know? And I don't mean to be funny, but I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. And, you know, I would go into your head and look back at myself and think, what a loser. You know, why can't you get this? And, you know, I know the old-timers were judging me. You know, we're judging you if you're new. You know, I mean, they say don't judge anybody in AA, right? You ever hear that? 5 minutes later, they're telling you to stick with the winners. That'll confuse the hell out of you. Or you'll hear stuff like, don't make any major decisions in your first year. You ever hear that? Take a look at the third step. Think that's funny? The other one I love is don't get in a relationship in your first year. No one knows if that works. No one's ever done it. The other one is God doesn't give us more than we can handle, right? If that was true, we wouldn't need God's help.
That's right, baby.
And the longer I've been sober, the more I've come to understand that I do need God's help. And I need this program. And I've been drunk in this room more than you have. And in those days, you used to be able to park in the back of this room. And, you know, I'd bring my 12-pack and it'd be under the seat of my car. And I'd come in here drunk and I'd go out every 5 or 10 minutes to take a slug off my beer. And that was the only time I ever had fun in AA. You know? And eventually, you know, I was coming to meetings drunk. I would go to 7-Eleven, get my big gulp cup. I'd fill it up with, you know, Jack Daniels, put a little Coke on the top, and I'd come to late night, you know, and I'd do some of my best sharing. You know, and they weren't laughing. It wasn't funny. And then I started going through treatment centers. And, you know, this isn't a plug for treatment. I want to welcome you if you just got out of treatment. But the time I finally got sober, I'd gone through treatment 28 times. And, you know, I remember telling my sponsor, you know, I went through treatment 28 times. You know, I was hoping that would get rid of the guy. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, you know, that doesn't make you an alcoholic. And I thought, you're kidding. He says, no, it means you paid $500,000 for a big book. And I didn't think that was funny. You know, and I'm not going to start citing pages out of the big book tonight. But page 101 of the big book says any scheme that attempts to shield the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. See, treatment was a great place to fatten me up for another run. Yeah, but you know what? Treatment never solved the problem. And if you're new, I always thought the problem was alcohol. And a guy said to me, you know, if that little bottle of Jack Daniels, that little glass of vodka, that little drink, if that's your problem, you're probably not an alcoholic. And then he said to me, if you're a real alcoholic, the type that's described in the doctor's opinion, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, your problem isn't alcohol. And it took me another decade to understand what they were trying to tell me. Because it was obvious that I couldn't live with alcohol. Everyone could see that I couldn't live with alcohol. From the time I was in junior high school, pissing in my pants, I couldn't live with alcohol. But the greater aspect of this disease for me as an alcoholic, and you might want to think about this if you're new, is the fact that I can't live without alcohol. And for any considerable period of time, I have this mind that always takes me back to a drink. So AA wasn't so much about getting sober as it was learning to live sober. You know, and this really isn't about not drinking. County jail's about not drinking. This was about learning to live sober. Because I have this mind that takes me back to a drink. I have a mind that'll argue with anybody about anything at any time. You tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. Sound familiar? And I'll blame you the whole time. Yeah, denial, like Mickey B says here, is don't even notice I am lying. You know, I don't just do it with beverage alcohol. You've been sober a while, you'll do it with chocolate cake. You know, do it with credit cards. You do it in relationships. There's like 400 12-step programs. They're all identical except for the first half of step one. And I'd play musical poisons in the first half of step one and never really address the problem. And like I said, I always thought the problem was alcohol. So there I am, one more time. I'm 120 pounds. I'm dying of untreated alcoholism. I'm sitting in, the detox circle. I've let everybody down one more time. Remember that great feeling in detox with your fellow associates? Right? A vision for you. And I'm sitting there in the detox circle, and this woman from AA comes in, in her business suit, and she does her H&I talk. One of Clancy's crew. Yeah, in the end of her talk, she says to us, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, I wouldn't do it. And I remember looking at her, and I looked at the guy next to me, and I said, what a bitch. And you know what she said? She said, the reason I wouldn't give you the gift of recovery is because I wouldn't rob you of the journey. And all of these years later, I understand that journey to recovery, very much like that journey to surrender that each and every alcoholic has to walk, is personal. And that journey to surrender, that gift, is really the cover charge for Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're new, I wish I could transmit that gift of desperation to you. But I can't. I do a lot of H&I. I should. I'm alumni from everywhere, right? And I have this panel up at the VA. And, we just did a marathon up there the other night. And it's like one of the greatest illustrations of surrender that I'd ever heard came out of one of those panels. And you get into a room full of soldiers, like at the VA, and you start talking about surrender, you know what happens, right? The room gets quiet, real quiet. But if you ever watch a soldier surrender, the illustration's perfect. You'll see him take the rifle, lay it down on the ground, sit down on the side of the road, wait for someone to tell him what to do. When you got 40 AK-47s pointed at your head, you don't throw down the gun with an attitude. Right? You're not sitting on the side of the road looking back at the gun. Am I looking back at that bottle? Am I looking back at the magic that alcohol created? See, because life had its moments for me, like all of us. And for those moments, I was willing to give my life to recapture and recreate the magic that I found in alcohol. And I came to understand that there's a big difference between the act of surrender that got me into these rooms over and over and over again and the state of surrender that's keeping the old-timers here. It's a completely different concept. It's kind of like watching a swan glide across a pond of still water. It looks so graceful. It looks so simple on the surface. But you know what's going on under the water, right? He's paddling like hell. And people always ask me, what changed? What was that thing that changed in me after, being the perpetual newcomer for 17 years? And all it was for me is that I became willing to take actions in Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't believe in. And that was the key to this whole thing for me. That I became willing to set aside everything I thought I knew about AA, about the 12 steps, about God, about you, so I could have a new experience with this. We have a chapter in the book, Into Action. There's no chapter into thinking. Or into share. There should be a chapter into whining, right? There's no chapter into feelings. And they said it right to my face. We don't care what you think. We don't care what you feel. The only thing we care about is what you do. And that was contrary to everything that I'd heard from the time I was 11 years old in therapy about my feelings. Because my whole life had been based on the way I felt. I didn't feel like going to work. I didn't feel like going to a meeting. I didn't feel like showing up for commitments. And the more that I took actions in Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't believe in, the more I got the freedom that they talk about here. And I wish that if you're new, I could give you that gift of desperation and the bigger gift, the gift of willingness. Because, you know, there's a direct relationship between surrender and willingness. You'll never see anybody more willing to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous than a guy that comes in this room after a long, hard run. We all see him. They'll do anything. 90 meetings in 90 days. They want to get a commitment, right? They want to take the coffee pot home. We've all seen them. They got 2 sponsors. 30, 60, 90 days later, that same guy looks me right in the eye and he says, "You mean we got to go to meetings every day?" And like a prize fighter that throws in the towel, what I do is I take that towel back one little piece at a time. And that willingness slowly diminishes. You know, there's a big difference between compliance and surrender for me. And I'd been in compliance with Alcoholics Anonymous for almost a decade. I was doing it for sober living, doing it for the judicial system, doing it for the parole department, doing it for family services. There's a million forms of compliance. You know, over here on the west side, they do it for the trust fund. But that concept of surrender, like that soldier that lays down that rifle, is unconditional. See, for an alcoholic like me, fear won't keep me sober. Getting a 3rd strike, living on the street, being homeless, losing my career, losing my family, losing my health, throwing away all my dreams. Did scared straight work for you? Now, you get a problem drinker, right? I'm sure there's a few problem drinkers here. You get a problem drinker and a real alcoholic in a holding tank. Now, the problem drinker is described as someone that can stop or moderate given sufficient reason. You get the problem drinker and a real alcoholic in a holding tank for, say, drunk driving. You got 2 completely different philosophies going on. You got the problem drinker on one side of the cell thinking, "Why did I drink so much last night? I knew I shouldn't have drank so much." Real alcoholics on the other side of the cell thinking, "Why did I take Venice Boulevard?" Now, if you look around the room carefully, what you'll see is the court card people aren't laughing. They don't think that's funny. Yeah, I'd hate me too. Problem drinker's wife says, "Baby, if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you." Problem drinker cleans up his act, doesn't drink in the house, gets a little Visine. Now, if my woman says, "Honey, if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you," you know what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about single life. Now, if you're an alcoholic like I am, the cover charge for Alcoholics Anonymous and that journey gets me to a place where I'm willing to give up everything for alcohol. It took it all. I don't have to think twice about whether I'm an alcoholic or not, and if you do, you know, maybe you'll discover that surrender on this journey. But for me, it took everything. And I didn't lose anything out there. I gave it away. It was all drink coupons for me. In order for someone like me to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous, what I've come to terms with is Alcoholics Anonymous has to be the first thing. My recovery has to be the first thing in my life. If anything gets in the way of AA, it's out of my life. A woman, I don't care how beautiful she is, how much she loves me, how good she makes me look. I remember the first time I said that from the podium, there she was in the back of the room. "I love you, baby. You don't look like an alcoholic. Why you got to go to all those meetings?" Next thing you know, it's Thanksgiving dinner. I'm there with her lovely family, you know, having Thanksgiving dinner, and she's like, "Sweetie, you can have a glass of wine. It's just one glass of wine." 4 more rehabs. I stole her purse that night. And she came to rehab with a get well card. You know I did it to her again, right? Like 3 more times. For her, a slip was 10 minutes of compassion. Now the Allenards aren't laughing at that either. They can't stand to see us have fun, right? If anything gets in the way of my recovery, it's out of my life. I have sponsees that pay more in taxes than I make all year. They got these huge careers and these little tiny programs. And you know what? I've never seen one of them stand the test of time here. What do I do for a living? I stay sober. What do I do for money? It's over there. And you know what? If I get them mixed up, I'm in handcuffs. Every good drama's got to have an antagonist, right? And you might be up here speaking next time. You know, knowledge wouldn't fix me. If you're new and you think that you're going to learn a little bit about relapse prevention, learn a little bit about your triggers, you might. You might. I mean, I remember sitting in relapse prevention class in my last treatment center, and, you know, the topic's relapse prevention and triggers, and I raise my hand and I say, waking up's a trigger for me. I was asked to leave the class. And there I am one more time behind, you know, a dumpster on 5th and San Julian on Skid Row reciting chapter 5 out of the big book. And the bum next to me is like, will you shut up? You're ruining my high. And I'm crying because I can't get back here. Because I got a head full of Alcoholics Anonymous, I got a belly full of booze, and I'm separate, different, and alone one more time. And if you think that's bad, I could think of something worse. Being in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for an extended period of time and not working the 12 steps. That could be worse. That's why I always want to address the guy in his last 30 days. You know, no one ever talks to him, the guy that's going to go out and blow his brains out after this meeting, because no one really understands what's going on with him. You know? And you don't have to get loaded to start this thing over. I told my sponsor I had a degree when I came into AA. And you know what he said to me? He said, thermometers have degrees. You know where they put those? I didn't think that was funny. He wasn't impressed. And you know, the clue, you hear it at the end of every meeting. If you think knowledge will fix you, how come they don't say at the end, they say keep coming back, it works if you work it, right? How come they don't say keep coming back, it works if you know it? Because this, for me, like a lot of us, was based on action, and it was based on principle. A set of principles, spiritual in nature, only through act, practice, and application would relieve me of the obsession. So I became willing to take actions here, again, that I didn't believe in. I love it when they say, oh, just think it through. Just play the tape through. I play the tape through. I'm driving down the 10 freeway, you know, past Skid Row, and I play the tape through to 5th and San Julian. You know what my head tells me? Skid Row wasn't that bad. Just give me a toothless honey and a cardboard box, I can make it on Skid Row. I got an ATM card. See, that's the insanity that we deal with. I always thought insanity was doing the same thing and expecting different results. Isn't that what you hear around here? That's not the insanity I deal with. My type of insanity is doing the same thing, knowing exactly what's going to happen, and doing it anyway. Now, pardon the illustration, but it's kind of like having sex with a gorilla. Now, if you have sex with a gorilla, it ain't over till the gorilla says it's over. You get that gorilla back in the cage, start healing up a little bit. It looks at you again with those loving eyes. I promise I won't hurt you this time. Remember how it used to be? Nobody's going to know. See, that's the way the disease talks to me over and over and over again. You know, you hear it in chapter 5 every time we read it. Our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that I'm an alcoholic and I can't manage my life, right? B, that no human power, not even Clancy, can relieve my alcoholism. And C, that God couldn't, would have sought. And I'm thinking, before and after what? What are they talking about? See, it's before and after I put down a drink. The problem drinker comes in here and thinks the unmanageability is based on his drinking. And if that's true, stop drinking. My experience shows me that when I'm not drinking, I have a whole nother set of problems. And they're outlined on page 52 of the big book. When I'm not drinking, I'm a prey to misery and depression. When I'm not drinking, I can't control my emotional nature. When I'm not drinking, I can't manage my personal relationships. Sound familiar? When I'm not drinking, I'm full of fear. When I'm not drinking, I'm of no use to other people. When I'm not drinking, I'm basically unhappy. And the way that plays out for me in untreated alcoholism is I don't fit in, I'm not part of, you don't understand me, everybody's in my way, I'm underappreciated, they're not paying me enough, the bitch is cheating on me, I gotta drink. And you know what? As soon as I pick up a cocktail, I intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle me. You give me 2 or 3 more drinks, fear of people and economic insecurity leave me, I'm buying the whole bar drinks. I'll write you a check. Not only am I getting better looking, honey, you're getting better looking. You give me a couple Vicodin, I could comprehend the word serenity and I know peace. Give me a little cocaine, I want to start a business with you. Now the bad news. If you think any of that's funny, there's something wrong with you. See, because that doesn't occur in the normal or temperate drinker. Normal drinker has a couple of drinks and he goes, blip, blip. I have a couple of drinks and boom, I want to get married, honey. I want to go to Brazil. I want to find the car keys I hid for myself before the first drink. You did that? See, alcohol creates the illusion that my life is manageable. And you can see it in the promises by substitution. What it says is we suddenly realize that God could do for us what we could not do for ourselves. Didn't some of us just suddenly realize that alcohol had done for us what we could not do for ourselves? There's a relationship between God and alcohol. You get into the ghettos in this country, a little southeast of here, and it's as clear as a bell. Because there's only 2 things left. When everything else is burned to the ground, there's 2 things left. Churches and liquor stores. You know why? Because they both give man hope. And hope doesn't matter to drunks like us until we become hopeless. And if you're new, I hope that everything's failed you. Because if I had one more option, I wouldn't have made it here. And like the literature talks about, I trade every imaginable remedy to solve this problem. Drunk or sober. See, for me, alcohol is an artificial means to a spiritual experience. These 12, thanks Ted, by the way. The 12 steps were an artificial means to a spiritual experience. Jesus, I'm sorry. A guy named Chuck C. said it better than anybody. He said the real problem here isn't alcohol. The real problem is a conscious separation from God. And then he said the solution is the 11th step, conscious contact with God. And that bridge from 2 to 11 for me was steps 4 through 9. Maybe what they should say is rarely have we seen a person fail that's done steps 4 through 9. Rarely have we ever seen anybody do 4 through 9. What I do is the notorious AA waltz. 1, 2, 3, drink. 1, 2, 3, drink. I mean, I'll turn my will and life over to anything but that which will solve my problem. You want to hide something from a newcomer? You know where to put it, right? Stick it in the literature. They'll never find it. It's the only thing people like us do in moderation is the steps. And that's a tragedy. Because in the final analysis, that was the only thing that ultimately solved my problem. My self-centered fear, my resentment, my dishonesty. Now, what's a conscious separation from God? That was a deep one. I didn't want to pray. You know why? I didn't want God to find out where I was. And you know what Alcoholics Anonymous has slowly done through the 12 steps is shown me a way to be rid of the things in myself that were blocking me from that experience. You know, because I had all of these old ideas that had blocked me from that power. You know, you get in a closet and pray for a hot dog, you know what? You'll die. You know, they say God can move mountains, but you know what? You better bring a shovel. Or I had a Santa Claus God. I had a parking meter God. That if I was good, I was going to get a reward. But what about when I didn't get the parking space? And eventually what happened was I slowly started to be rid of these old ideas, that I had always had a conditional relationship with this power. And what I've come to terms with is that alcoholism is the only prison where the key's inside. And the keys to that prison were the 12 steps that slowly showed me a way to be rid of these things in myself. It was kind of like when they asked Michelangelo, how did you make the statue of David? Michelangelo said, I never made the statue of David. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David, and there he was. And by default, I eventually get to that spiritual path by clearing away the things that are blocking me. You know, and I wish I could give you that, but I can't make anybody take the actions. There's a poem in Notre Dame that says, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul I could not free. I sought my brother, and I found all three. And we talk about the therapeutic value of one alcoholic working with another is without parallel. You know? And it was an evolution for me. Bobby Earl said it better than anybody. The story about the priest and the atheist. There's a priest and an atheist, and they're in a bar in Alaska. And the priest says to the atheist, how come you don't believe in God? And the atheist said, I tried God once. And the priest said, well, what do you mean? And the atheist said, well, I was in a blizzard, and I was lost, and I knew I was going to die. And I got on my knees, and I said, God, if there's a God, help me. And the priest said, you must believe in God. You're here. You know what the atheist said? He said, you don't understand. Right after I got off my knees, I bumped into this Eskimo, and he showed me the way back into town. And if you're new and you're dying of this thing, you know, find the Eskimos. Find the people that have walked that path. You know, find the people that are living this thing. Because, like one of the birthday people said, and congratulations to the birthday people, this is a design for living. It's a way of life. It's a roadmap to spiritual success. And you know what? I sat in the rooms for 17 years, and I couldn't hear the message. Partly because of the distractions. You know? And maybe it's the dark side's way of just taking us with them. I have no idea. But eventually I heard the light and I heard the truth. You know, and I got to people that actually had worked the steps, that had had a psychic change, that had had a spiritual awakening, and they showed me the clear-cut path. You know, it says it right in the preface to the book, precisely how we have recovered. There's not a lot of latitude for opinion in the word precisely. You know, and I feel really, really lucky that I got with some big book fundamentalists that took me through the book and showed me some clear-cut directions. The original manuscript said, rarely have we seen a person fail that's followed our directions. And back to my defiance and my denial, you know, I wouldn't follow directions. You know, and I paid the price. I lived in misery for half of my life. Drunk or sober, I was miserable. You know, my sponsor said, what do you want from Alcoholics Anonymous? And, you know, I grew up in Malibu. I said, I want a yacht and a Learjet. And you know what he said? He said, if you work steps 4 through 9 and you consistently live in 10, 11, and 12, what you'll get is a quiet mind and a loving heart. And I remember looking at him and thinking, what do I want that for? But you know, if you're suffering from untreated alcoholism, you know what it means to have a head that won't shut up. To have the mind that's up at 3 in the morning telling you you're a loser. Telling you you're not going to make it. Telling you the job you have, they're going to do the background check on you. You know, that's the kind of mind I have. The mind that's up 5 minutes before me every day saying, screw AA. These people aren't like you. And the opposite of a loving heart is a vindictive heart. It's a prejudiced heart. It's a resentful heart. You know, in all of my life, I was crucified between 2 thieves, yesterday and tomorrow. And yesterday, I have guilt, shame, and remorse. And tomorrow, I have fear, anxiety, and worry. And you know what? Our spirits are very much like a body of water. When they're perfectly still, they best reflect the heavens. I know how to get there with a bottle of liquor. But unless I can find that sense of comfort and ease that I sought from alcohol through this process, there's no way I'm going to stay here for the long haul. You know, I'm slowly going to spin out in here, and I'm going to start to get separate, different, and alone, and I'm going to start to think you people aren't like me. And you know what? It's like being on a merry-go-round. You get in the middle of a merry-go-round, and you're going to start bouncing off people. You get on the edge, and you don't connect, and it's like, it's no wonder you don't see people stay here for the long haul. And it gets harder and harder with every chip. You know, and it doesn't have to be like that. You know, the reason I couldn't get sober is because I wasn't willing to give anything. You know, my sponsor said the work wasn't doing the steps, it was taking other people through the steps. It was like the face of that clock. When you're in 12, you better be in 1 with a newcomer. And that was the greatest gift that I ever got, was being able to take other people through the process. You know, and that's where a lot of us get the freedom. And what did I get? I got freedom from the bondage of self. I found a way to navigate around the drama. I got a way to match calamity with serenity. I got relationships that work. You know, I got a freedom that I never thought possible. And if you're new, you know, and you want what we have, I know you may not want what we have, but when you go home tonight and you hit the pillow, ask yourself if you want what you got. You know, and then come ask us for help. Thank you.